Hello, and welcome to Photons and Feelings, the podcast about photography and the meaning of life. No pressure. So, this episode number 2, I am here in Stratford, Connecticut. We decided to rent an Airbnb on the beach, and it's just a beautiful location. So, if you hear some waves, if you hear some seagulls, if you hear some voices, it's just the beauty of where I'm at today. And the sun is setting, the light is beautiful, the breeze is really nice, and this is going to be a good place to podcast, I guess. So today's topic is the first selfie ever. But before I do that, I just wanted to talk about a few things. First of all, thank you if you listened to my first episode. Thank you very much. I really appreciated it. There was a little bit of a delay getting it distributed to the other platforms like iTunes and Google Play and whatnot. One interesting thing about Anchor was I listened back to the first episode and I started hearing these claps and I was like, what is that? That wasn't in the audio file. I was kind of worried what that was, and turns out if you listen through the Anchor app, you can actually clap as you're listening, and it's kind of like a digital version of feedback because when there's a live speaker, you immediately have that feedback of people reacting to what you're saying. So I thought that was kind of cool. So if you want to listen on Anchor, it's just a nice little feature that they got going on there. So just something about this podcast. This podcast, its subheading, the subtitle is the podcast about photography and the meaning of life. And the last episode, I kind of talked about what the purpose of life was. And I don't mean to say that this is the end-all, be-all. I don't claim to be a guru or anything. It's just one person's perspective. It's just my own revelations, my own discoveries, and I'm just sharing it with you. And what else? So this podcast is kind of just me trying to hash out some of these ideas. One of my goals this year was to start making headway to writing a book. As some of you may know, I hated writing in high school, but here I am. This podcast is kind of just a way for me to build content, micro content, as building blocks for chapters for ultimately the book. And so these ideas aren't perfected yet. They're not finalized yet. All the details aren't quite there yet. This is kind of a way for me to just kind of practice that and get it out there. Let's begin. So let's kind of go back to the beginning. It says in the Bible, God created man in his image. He created man and woman in his image. And for me as a photographer, that kind of interested me because it says image, and that kind of keyword sticks out to me. And so I started thinking, well, what is an image? Well, to me as a photographer, an image is a moment in time captured. So Adam was created in God's image. And I started thinking, well, what does that mean? So for example, if you go to my Facebook and you see a picture of me relaxing on this beach during Memorial Day, you might see me having fun, or you might see me just relaxing on the sand, soaking up the sun, and just at peace. So you can't judge me fully by this one picture, right? I don't own a beach house. I don't, this isn't a normal, regular thing that I do, but I just happen to take a vacation here. However, I'm more than this one image, right? So I'm also an angry person. I also get scared. I also get frustrated. I also get confused. I also get happy. I also get really excited. I also get really motivated, driven. And that kind of stuff isn't conveyed in this beach picture of me, right? This image is a part of me, but it's not all of me, right? So when God created Adam in his image, basically, he took a part of him and imprinted it upon Adam. And he took a different part of him and imprinted it upon Eve, and so on and so forth. So he's taken a different part of him and created me in his image, right? So you can't judge God by this one image or this one person, but you can see this one person and the good that they do, the good person that they are, and get a glimpse of who God is. Just like with the beach image, you can't judge me fully by this one picture, but you can get a glimpse of who I am. And the more pictures that you see of me, for example, the more pictures you see of me on my Facebook feed or my Instagram, you get a bigger sense of who I am the more and more you consume, right? Or at least you get a sense of who I'm trying to project to be, right? Because that's kind of one of the downfalls of social media. We tend to put our best foot forward and hide our ugliness. As I mentioned in the first episode, how I talked about the purpose of life is these three things. Finding your image was the first thing. The second thing is once you find it, you practice it, you hone it, you get better at it, you become excellent at it. And then the third thing was you use that gift, you use that image to serve other people. You use that image to love on other people. Now, the first part is finding your image and figuring out what your purpose in life. That's a big question, and that's a big question that I had going through high school into college. You have to choose your major, and to me that was like a life sentence. Okay, this is what I'm going to declare as a major. This is what I'm going to be stuck with the rest of my life. And so I kind of cowered in that pressure, and I kind of lost myself. And so that is a huge question I think a lot of people have is, what am I here to do? What's the overall purpose of this? What's the goal? Now, if you don't prescribe to Christianity or faith or belief in some sort of higher power, that's okay. I'm not here to argue religion with you. I'm just here to talk about one person's perspective of trying to find meaning and fulfillment in this life. So, image, it's commonly described as your gifts, your talents, your natural abilities. As you grow up, you start to figure out what you're good at, right? You know, some people are athletic, some are good at chess, some are good at reading, and others at math. But none of these are mutually exclusive. None of these are, it's one or the other. You can have multiple areas of talent. Some people are good at reading and math, So growing up, like I said, I didn't have a strong sense of who I was. And when that pressure came of trying to decide a career path, I asked my dad, actually. I asked him, how did you figure out what you wanted to do? And the advice he gave me was actually pretty good. When he was younger, he tried everything. Through trial and error, through putting himself out there, he figured out what he was good at, what he was bad at, what he loved doing, and what he hated doing. And if you think you're an introvert and you think that you hate being in front of people, leading a group of people, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself out there leading people if you hate being in front of people? Well, it's those kinds of risks that you need to take to really discover that, no, actually, I do love this. For example, I used to be in the Army, and part of my job was to lead volunteer groups out into the city that we were in, cleaning the river, doing conversational English classes. We were in a different country. I put out the order that we need so many soldiers from each unit, and the leaders would basically just volunteer people. And we called it being voluntold. So it wasn't quite volunteering. And so we'd get these soldiers on the bus, and the first timers is quite interesting. The first timers, you see a lot of disgruntled people get on the bus because they're like, I just had a long day at work. The last thing I want to do is go out into the city and talk to people or do whatever volunteer job. I just want to go back and play video games or whatever. And so there'd be a lot of disgruntled people, but it was funny because that's the bus ride there. There was this tone of I'm being forced to volunteer here. But the interesting thing is, we go out and they actually serve people through this volunteer activity. And then they actually have interactions with people, these English conversations. It was actually a really good time for these soldiers. And then on the bus ride back, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, the ride back, their tone has completely changed. They had such a positive experience that they were like can I come back next time? It was most often the people who hated being voluntold at first that they loved it and they were the most enthusiastic about it. And so that's just an example of putting yourself out there, even though you think it's going to be this negative, not a good experience. It's in those experiences that you realize by going through it that, oh, wow, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be, but even greater, I actually love doing it. But when you put yourself out there, you actually start to realize that, oh, if I stay clammed up in the image that I think I am, I'm an introvert, I'm not a good outspoken person. If you just stay clammed up, you're going to basically kind of box your own self in. You're not going to fully grow, and you're not going to discover the things that you actually like doing. And of course, you might try something and you realize, and it confirms that, no, this isn't what you want to do. But it's through those risks, it's through those putting yourself out there that you actually kind of discover more about yourself. You discover more about the image that you are. I think in the beginning, when you're not sure who you are, when you're starting to figure out this journey of figuring out who you are, I think, at least for me, I think you start identifying outward. Meaning, if you don't feel like you have a strong direction or a strong identity, I think there's this draw to identify outward. And that is, you see personalities, you see things, you see activities that you are just kind of attracted to, or you're drawn to. And so you start to identify with that. You start to adopt their identity. If you look up to somebody, you might start to draw their identity as part of your own. And it may not necessarily be kind of who you are, but as you're growing up, as you're navigating life, you start to kind of draw these things from many different sources and many different people. So, for example, in photography, early on in your journey, you pick up a camera and you start shooting what interests you. And then if you look at kind of the pictures that you snap, you're going to start to see that they're kind of scattered. You might be interested in flowers in the beginning because you're drawn to all the colors and the beautiful tones and the shapes. And then you see a beautiful landscape picture and you're like, ooh, I want to go shoot that. All of a sudden you see this portrait of somebody that moves you and you're like, ooh, I want to shoot that. And then you see this beautiful fashion dress or whatever and you're like, ooh, I want to shoot fashion. And so early on you start to kind of be pulled into different things that attract you. It's like, ooh, squirrel. You're just drawn in all these different directions. Trying to be a photographer in New York, you can't really market yourself as a generalist. You have to be a very specific shooter. You have to shoot in this very specific style, and that's called your vision in the photo world. And so people generally don't hire photographers who shoot a variety of stuff. If you think about it from the shoes of people who hire photographers, if I have a job where I need to hire a photographer and it's shooting this kind of specific thing. There's a story that I heard of back in the day, back when Domino's Pizza, they had this food stylist that can cook a pizza. So when you cut the pizza and you lift it up, the slice of pizza, the perfect amount of cheese that strings off of the slice, there was a food stylist that specialized in that. And it got that specific. And so whenever there was a pizza shoot, it's like, you need to hire that person. That's kind of an extreme example. But the whole point is, like, as you start to grow in your journey of whatever you're doing, for example, in my case, photography, you start to narrow down what you want to specialize in, what you really want to put yourself out there as, what you want to market yourself as. That kind of goes back to your talents, your gifts, right? I may be able to shoot a great shot of product, sunglasses, purses, bags, whatever, but it doesn't really interest me. So I'm more drawn to portraiture as I've grown through my photographic journey. So now I seek to shoot more portraits and put that kind of stuff out there, even though I can shoot other stuff. Over time, as you start to figure out what you really, really love, you have to get to a point where you say no to the good things in order to say yes to the great things. And so as you get older, your time becomes more precious. You don't have time to do everything that you want to do. I think John Maxwell said, if you go out to a forest and you hit a tree 5 times with an axe one day, and then the next day you hit a different tree 5 times with an axe, and then the next day you hit a different tree 5 times with an axe, eventually you're just going to get nowhere. Nothing's going to happen. But if you focus on that one tree, hit it 5 times every day, eventually that tree is going to knock down. Now, you might not make an impact on the other trees, but you've made an impact on this one tree. I think the whole point is early on we get drawn to many different things, but over time we start to figure out what we really want to focus on. And that's when you start to identify inward. So after a long period of trying different things and figuring out what you're good at, when you're not, what you love and what you hate doing, over time you start to figure out like, oh, this is me. Oh, this is not me. Oh, this is kind of me. You start to identify inward. After that early period of identifying outward, you start to identify inward. And that's shown as confidence in who you are and confidence in your own self. And so actually I wanted to take a moment and talk about this period of identifying outward. One thing you want to do is beware the in crowd. Beware the in crowd. It's commonly seen as, there's always a popular group. There's always a cool crowd that everyone is naturally drawn to. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people are naturally drawn to. It's like, oh, I want to be cool too. I want to be part of that crowd. And then even like the haters, a lot of the hatred is driven by not being a part of that group. When I was younger, in high school, I was kind of a loner. I didn't have that outgoing or the gregarious or even the confidence to start approaching and trying to be part of the cool crowd. This kind of thing happens everywhere, not just in high school. It happens in college. It happens in the workplace. It happens everywhere. It doesn't end. There's no boundaries in terms of age. And so there's this natural draw of trying to become part of the in crowd. And so that's what identifying outward. And so if you want to identify with the people of the in crowd, you start to kind of lose yourself. You start to strive for things that are part of this group, this reputation or whatever. But I think when you start to identify inward, when you start to find confidence in yourself, when you start to really know who you are, the in crowd doesn't faze you anymore. The in crowd doesn't faze you anymore. Even recently, I started to see this, and I got to a point where I was like, why am I trying to be in this in crowd? Why am I trying to be a part of this group? And I realized like, I'm happy with the friends that I have. Stop striving to be part of this cool group and just be happy in your own self. And that takes a lot of self-confidence. Be happy in your own self. Be happy in your own identity. You know what? Like when you're confident in yourself, you make you and your group of friends cool. You don't need to try to be part of the popular crowd. All you need to do is find friends that you are friends with, or find, oh, that's funny. All you need to do is find confidence in the friends that you have and make that the cool crowd. Make you the cool crowd. Because when you try to strive for something that you're not really finding yourself. So back to Adam. When God created Adam, he took some dirt, he took some dust, he molded it, he shaped it, breathed life into it, and as he did so, he imprinted his image upon Adam. And this is the first instance of a selfie. So the title of this episode, the first selfie ever, Adam was God's first selfie. God took a medium and put his image on it, just like we do with a camera, right? We take a medium of digital. Well, digital is a little fleeting now, but if you think of a film camera, the medium is the physical thing of film, and You put your image on it. You take a picture of yourself, and that's a selfie, right? That is exactly what God did with Adam. He took a medium, which was clay, which was dirt, which was dust, and then he put his image on it. And so that's the first instance of a selfie. So you are God's selfie, and you were created in his image. But I think unlike a single photo, however, unlike a single picture, you are a dynamic image, meaning you're not constrained, you're not boxed in by one picture. When we are created in God's image, it's not just a single image where it's just, a moment that passes by, but I think it's a dynamic image. When it says we are created in God's image, it's not a static thing. Like, you're not destined to be this one thing only for the rest of your life. I think it's dynamic. I think you grow. I think you change, you adapt, you break down, you rebuild. And I don't think there's a true self, as in a single, settled, achieved state that we get into at some point in our lives after a long journey of, discovery and whatnot. I think we're constantly evolving. Once we get there, we go, what's next? We never stay there. Things that you dream of, one day you will get there. And then once you get there, you don't stop. You just go, well, what's next, right? So who you are today will not be who you are tomorrow. And who you are tomorrow will not be who you are forever. So I think this journey of self-discovery, of finding out your image, it's not a static thing. It's not an end goal. It's basically, I think as Rob Bell said, it's a dance. We dance with God. It's a movement. It's a thing that we continue to discover. So yeah, that's kind of the story of the first selfie ever. I'm sorry if you think you took the first selfie, but I think God's got you there. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this second episode. I personally think it was a little scattered. I hope to get better as a communicator over time, but thank you for sticking with me throughout this episode. Don't forget to hit subscribe on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/AndrewHKim. I'm also on Instagram, also at AndrewHKim. And yeah, check out the Anchor app. I would love your feedback. I would love your questions. Till next time. See ya.